So I was initially going to skip out on making a video about this because I didn't really think that this trade moved the needle all too much, even though I absolutely love the player that the Philadelphia Flyers got in this Predators deal. But we had ourselves another Philadelphia Flyers trade happen immediately after, so the Flyers wheeling and dealing, two big trades here, two trades that I like a lot for Philly. Starting out with Wade Allison for Denis Gurianov. This is between the Flyers and the Predators. We just made a video talking about Nashville, by the way. Big fleece on the Arizona Coyotes for Jason Zucker. But because they got themselves that forward in Zucker, because they got Anderson Dolan off of waivers yesterday, because they traded for... Who was it that they made the trade for yesterday? Oh, it's at the tip of my tongue. We just made a video about it. Zucker, Anderson Dolan, and Anthony Beauvillier. That's who it was. Because the Predators had themselves some extra forwards, they needed to shell out a guy. And they traded away Denis Gurianov over to Philadelphia. Now I get it, they got Wade Allison in return, who is also a forward, but these are AHL caliber guys. I'd say for Denis Gurianov heading over to Philadelphia, this is the prize in this trade. Gurianov is 26 years old, 6'3", 205, big left-handed right-wing player signed till the end of this season, making $850,000. Now, the reason Gurianov stands out to me is because in the 2015 NHL Entry Draft, he was a 12th overall guy by Dallas, and in this time frame, he was seen as one of the better goal scorers, if not the best goal scorer in the entire draft. Now, I get it, you have McDavid, you have Eichel, those guys are automatically like on top, but when it came to guys who were just pure run-of-the-mill, goals in, goals out kind of guy, Gurianov was that player. And in the Ladia Togliatti system in the MHL and KHL, he was a pretty good player, all things considered. He was good in the junior level, was okay, passable at the KHL level. You could say 5 points in 47 games played kind of sucks, but then again, he's playing in the KHL. What more do you want for an 18-year-old player? But for Gurianov, he eventually made his way over to the Texas Stars, was an immediate goal-scoring threat in that system, and he maxed out at 48 points in 57 games. Now, ever since then, he had become a regular NHL guy. He made the Stanley Cup Finals with the Stars in 2019-20, had 17 points in 27 games played and 9 goals in that playoff run. But his time in Dallas started to come to an end when he stopped getting production. When he stopped getting those opportunities, he went from 31 points in 73 games to 9 points in 43 games the next year, and then he got traded to the Montreal Canadiens, where he had 8 points in 23 games. Now, I will say, the brief, limited stint that Denis Gurianov had with the Canadiens was a good one. I think a lot of Canadiens fans thought that they had themselves a gem here. Plus the fact that Gurianov is young enough, at only 26 years old, 25 at the time, to justify trying to work with this guy and build up more of a profile and get more of an established NHL role with the Canadiens. It's just, they ended up letting him go. He went over to Nashville. He had 2 points in 14 games. They didn't really use him. And so putting him in the AHL, he dominated that league for the first time in a few years. 30 points in 27 games played with the Milwaukee Admirals. And now he's going over to Philadelphia, where hopefully he's finally going to be given a top-tier role. You want to talk about Philadelphia prospects like Cutter Gauthier, top-tier goal scorer that eventually left the team and went over to Anaheim in that trade. You want to talk about goal scorers like Tyson Foerster, not Cutter Gauthier, we just talked about him, Matvei Michkov. You have a few other guys that are making themselves known in this system as goal-scoring young guys. Denis Gurianov, if he was just like 4 or 5 years younger, would have been smack dab in that range. And so for Philadelphia, with all the prospects and the guys that they have in their system and their depth chart, I definitely do think this is a good move. I do think this is a good prospect and somebody that is worth putting a flyer for. Bobby Brink is another goal-scoring guy that I've been a big fan of. Of course, we had talked about Tyson Foerster this entire year. Who else is on this system that I think is good? I mean, Matvei Michkov is the easy one. He is so gosh darn good at scoring goals. So heading into the future, I'm really excited to see what Denis Gurianov is going to be capable of achieving, partly because I'm biased. I like the guy since he was drafted, and he was a Canadian, so I have my eyes on him. But going over to Nashville, you've got Wade Allison, who is a 26-year-old forward in his own right, same age range as Gurianov, just a year younger, drafted in 2016, and this season with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, he's got 17 points in 46 games. He played with the Flyers last year, had 15 points in 60 total games played, but wasn't really all too much of a needle mover, and it's why he was in the AHL this year. So the Predators are getting themselves an all-right guy. I'd say that the Flyers are getting themselves a really, really interesting guy, but that's not even the only trade we want to talk about in this video, as the Flyers also got themselves Erik Johnson for a 4th-round pick. Now, there are a few other things to note here. There is no salary retention on this Erik Johnson acquisition, and at 35 years old, 6'4", 225, right-handed player, signed till the end of the season, making $3.25 million. The Flyers really are just getting themselves a guy because they need a defenseman. They're getting extra right-handed depth. They just got Jamie Drysdale. They're getting themselves a guy now in Johnson who doesn't really need the moon and the stars. He doesn't need the best opportunity. He doesn't need to play in the top 4. He can just be a guy. He was already in his heyday when he was drafted 1st overall in 2006, and eventually, as a Colorado Avalanche stable defender in a cup-winning team, he found himself on Buffalo, where he had 3 points, 3 goals in 50 games played this year. It's kind of funny, honestly, how Erik Johnson was at 25 points just 2 seasons ago, but then significantly dropped off to 8 points in 63 games last year. The Flyers could use his leadership, the Flyers could use his veteran experience, and realistically, they're not really going to get too much more out of Erik Johnson than a bottom-pairing, extra locker room kind of guy, because at the end of the day, Erik Johnson hasn't really been in the best spot compared to what he was capable of doing in the past. He's 35 years old now, man. Like, come on. He signed on to the end of this season as well, so I honestly doubt that Johnson is going to get himself any sort of a long-term deal after this year. I mean, he already is just coming off of that $6 million AAV salary he was making with the Colorado Avalanche, so seeing Johnson go down this path, $3.25 million, trade bait for the Philadelphia Flyers, it's not really like Philadelphia is going to be pushing for playoff and Stanley Cup contention this season, so just having this guy to mentor the young guys, I think is a pretty good add. So at the end of the day, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about these 2 guys going over to Philly. Denis Gurianov, a prospect that I've always liked and a player that I've thought had a lot more to show for, and Erik Johnson. What are your thoughts on the return? Johnson going over for a 4th-round pick in 2024. Buffalo fans, what are your thoughts on this entire transaction here for Philadelphia? And if you're a Predators fan, what are your thoughts on Wade Allison going over to your team? Do you think this is going to be a needle mover for your squad, or do you think this is really just a transitory move for the Milwaukee Admirals at this moment? Buffalo fans especially, what are your thoughts on Erik Johnson and the way that he played this season? We recognize that there really wasn't too much that you could have been excited for, but at the end of the day, you guys just made another trade for another left-handed defenseman in, who was it over here? Kalle Jalin. So maybe Erik Johnson's spot on the roster goes over to Jalin. Who really knows? But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Johnson for a 4th-round pick trade, as well as the Gurianov for Allison trade. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.